U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday called off a planned summit with the DPRK's leader Kim Jong Un, even after the DPRK followed through on a pledge to blow up tunnels at its nuclear test site. Referring to a scheduled June 12th meeting with Kim in Singapore, Trump said in a letter to the DPRK leader that sadly, based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in your most recent statement, I feel it would be inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting. Earlier on Thursday, the DPRK had repeated a threat to pull out of the unprecedented summit with Trump next month and warned it was prepared for a nuclear showdown with Washington if necessary. So where are we now in this diplomatic stalemate, or is this a diplomatic stalemate? Are talks between the two leaders totally off the agenda, or could they still be salvaged? And if they were, would they achieve anything anyway? Welcome to this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, and I'm joined today from Washington, D.C. by Soojin Park, a public policy fellow at the Wilson Center, who is also a former deputy spokesperson for the Ministry of Unification in the Republic of Korea government. Here in the Beijing studio, we're joined by Mr. Jishe, Director for Strategic Studies at the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So welcome to both of you for appearing on the show. I'm going to keep my phone next to me today because at this hour, 9:30 in the evening Beijing time, but early morning in the U.S. time, it seems that anything can happen. Basically what we're hearing is that it is reported that U.S. President Donald Trump is saying U.S. now talking to North Korea after cancelling summit, saying everybody plays games. So, Ms. Soojin Park, let me begin with you. At this moment, is the talk totally off the table? Is there any chance, anything that can be done to save this date?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your program. Yes, I think there is much to be done that can be done to save this summit. First of all, it's positive that North Korea has left the prospects open and has not been so provocative in its statement by Vice Minister Kim Jong Un issued last night, time here. And the fact that U.S. has left the doors open, even in the letter, the cancellation letter by Trump, and also in his press briefing yesterday, that he would be willing to resume a dialogue once Kim Jong Un makes this decision to, denuclearize and be sincere. So I think at this point is to remain cool-headed on both sides and to engage in direct dialogue rather than in public statements or press briefings through media. So it's important at this point to engage in direct talks that it's not that publicized, and also find out what the true intention of each other is before making any dramatic moves.
Right. Well, if it is true what the report is saying, that President Trump is reported to be saying that everybody plays game. Mr. Fan, is it really this game that we are seeing, that or the letter or the response from the DPRK, and now possibly they're talking to each other, is this really a big game that they're playing so that they can have the upper hand, I don't know, in either public narrative or in the substance of the meeting?
Well, we can see sort of gameplay. As we can see in last year, both leaders treated harsh rhetorics and threatening each other. But in the sudden, starting from early this year, they began to approach each other, and then later on, they tried to schedule a summit. Even the summit was cancelled formally by President Trump. Well, I still think there's a chance for them to resume sort of talks. For example, they have left the door open from both sides, including the statement from Kim Jong Un. And also, they have made great efforts to prepare for the coming summit. And lastly, I think this is almost the last chance for diplomacy. I hope they will not miss this opportunity.
So do you see an opportunity that the talks can actually go ahead as scheduled early June in Singapore, Mr. Fan?
Well, nothing is impossible for President Trump, and predictability is the only thing we can predict from him. And he sent out tweets, and he changed his mind overnight. and he can do everything, other president may not be able to do. He's an unconventional leader, and so I think that's possible.
What about on the side of Kim Jong Un, Ms. Park, in D.C.? What kind of leader is President Trump playing games with?
You mean President Trump playing games with Kim Jong Un?
Yeah, what kind of style of leadership, what kind of style of engagement, of diplomacy does Kim Jong Un has?
For President Trump?
Right, in the whole thing.
It's interesting right now. It's interesting to see the interplay between the United States and North Korea at the moment, because up until now, we've only witnessed North Korea engaging in brinkmanship. Meaning that canceling summits or high-level meetings last minute, using the very bellicose rhetoric to get what it wants. But now it's not just North Korea, it's President Trump in the U.S. engaging in a similar tactic. So it seems very interesting that this dynamic, and also the fact that I think North Korea also admitted in its statement from Vice Minister Kim Jong Un that they were the cancellation was unexpected and also surprising for them. So it's very interesting to see North Korea react to this kind of behavior or pattern, tactic used by the U.S., which it has never experienced before or is not used to. So this actually is a kind of a change in the dynamic between these two players, and that's why it remains to be seen how North Korea would be affected by this kind of brinkmanship from U.S.
At this moment, we need to understand exactly what happened, what led to President Trump issuing this letter that really caught the world by surprise. Mr. Fan, exactly what derailed the talks in the mind of President Trump?
I believe there are several reasons. The number one is that I believe President Trump asked too much from North Korea. The objective had been very high. He's talking about CVID and talking about PVID. He wants to get it done overnight.
Meaning the irreversible, complete,
verifiable dismantlement. Yes. Oh. And so his reason that's very high, and he wants to get it done very quickly, and he do not want to phased approach. If we look back to the history of the North Korean nuclear issue, you just cannot get it done very soon. But that's President Trump's style. That's why, at the last moment, they canceled the summit. Other than that, I think that in the process of preparing for the coming summit, something went wrong. According to Washington Post reports that North Korea did not show up in Singapore for the planned preparation meeting. That could be the reason. And lastly, the harsh rhetoric from the VP, Vice President Pence, and also from the National Security Advisor John Bolton, has been very threatening. I think that has make North Korea deliver a statement that they want to reconsider the coming summit.
Okay, there are several reasons, but which is the main reason? Is it really the DPRK official not showing up to the meeting, not answering the emails, or is it because Pence reportedly or seen to have threatened the DPRK with the so-called Libya model, or is it because the U.S. is asking too much in such a short period of time? Ms. Park, what do you think is really the most important reasons here?
Well, I think there are all the reasons. All those reasons, I think, played into this point now, and we would never know because they would not single out the one reason. So I think all those factors have played in, but I think the fact that North Korea's the latest statement from Choi Sun-hee and the Vice Minister as well, attacking, actually ridiculing Vice President Pence, also may have been the last straw, because there was another one by Kim Jong Un that made a big issue of the Libyan model, but after that statement, the U.S. did not react officially. But this time, after Choi Sun-hee and also the mention of a nuclear showdown, this bellicose rhetoric was something that I don't think was did not go well with the U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, and also the very direct ridicule of Vice President Pence. So I think this kind of attitude, hostile attitude, and the mentioning of the nuclear showdown was the last button, I think. So the U.S. administration had felt a need to take a strong stance that this is not acceptable, this kind of rhetoric or attitude. So I think that may have been the last straw.
Well, really, I think we're kind of debating the question of whether the hen appeared first or the eggs first, right? Who started this whole thing? It was also going also very well. Everybody was happy, and somehow bit by bit, I think also the military drill, right, when strategic bombers were used, I think that might have also played into this. But let's look inside the Trump administration, Mr. Fan. John Bolton spoke, Mike Pence spoke, and they all very hawkish. You know, even Pence is seen to have lashed out some threat against the DPRK, although he called it facts. Who should really be speaking here on the part of the United States? Because the DPRK is watching very closely.
Well, for President Trump, he should discipline his team, including Vice President Pence and John Bolton. You know, there are several players in this process, but there can be only one voice from the United States. You know, considering the long history of dealing with DPRK, this should have noticed, recognized that the subtlety of rhetorics. But you know, there are several voices: the tweets from President Trump, the talks by John Bolton, and the Pence, you know, thinly veiled threat to DPRK. That's a big problem. You know, you can only have one voice. Secretary Pompeo had been the key person, but he did not talk much. But the other guys, the hawkish guys, have talked too much.
So are they speaking their own mind, or are they speaking on behalf of the administration? Is there a coherent policy that, you know, they say, okay, we want to achieve this, but Pence, you go out and you lash out a threat like this, and John Bolton, you talk like this, so in the end we can achieve some kind of goal. Is there some kind of strategy like that, Ms. Park, in your analysis, please?
Well, this does not seem like a very good strategy if indeed it was intended. But it seems like that's how President Trump likes it. He does not like to give one message, one straightforward message. He likes to have that message, but at the same time, he wants competing voices within the administration to let the other side know that, you know, it is unpredictable and things go awry if you don't correspond in a manner that is desirable. So I think in a way, this was intended to have these mixed signals, the so-called bad cop, good cop, to let North Korea know that, you know, if you do these good things that we want, you know, there's so many good things for you. Like, you know, Secretary Pompeo said he can make North Korea eat meat all the, you know, for North Korean people and have healthier lives, more prosperous life, a better economy, while at the same time having John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, and Vice President Pence continuously talking about Libyan model and also threatening that if the deal does not come through, North Korea will face the fate of Libya as well. So I think the fact that President Trump did not deny it outright, and also in this case eventually canceled the summit in a letter, means that he likes to have these conflicting voices.
On the part of the DPRK, before we go into the break, Mr. Fan, do you think the DPRK might have overreacted as well, even intentionally overreacted, because maybe they were hesitant after President Trump said, let's go into the meeting? They kind of realized that this is not the meeting they wanted in the first place.
Well, North Korea really care about many things. They have made some very, you know, good gestures, including made some commitment in non-proliferation, no more tests, and also, you know, destroy the testing sites. and release the 3 US citizens, but they get nothing back. And what they get is harsh rhetoric from Pence and from John Bolton. That's kind of very threatening rhetoric. So that's the last straw. Yeah, I do not think that DPRK is overreacting. I think they have deep concerns about this security.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll continue to talk about the latest twists on the DPRK nuclear issue. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point with me, Li Xin, coming to you from Beijing, and my guests are Soojin Park, a public policy fellow at the Wilson Center, joining us from Washington, D.C., and Mr. Jishe from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So multiple media outlets have reported that President Trump is reported to have said that the talks scheduled, that he cancelled last night, could still go ahead with the DPRK leader Kim Jong Un on June the 12th. So indeed, very interesting twists and happening very, very fast. So, Ms. Park, let me go to you. Why is it so important for both sides to have these talks going on as scheduled on the part of the United States first?
From the United States perspective, it is important to, so much are on the stakes for this U.S. summit with the North Korea. President Trump has been at the forefront of these, the talks, and the expectations have been raised so high for the summit to go on. And he has actually been very optimistic that he could produce a breakthrough and also a peace on the Korean Peninsula. And there has been also even talk of a Nobel Peace Prize for this kind of outcome that is expected, although the summit is canceled. And also politically, for President Trump is very much invested, given the circumstances that there is investigation going on in his Mueller case, and also all these political circumstances are not favorable for him, especially with the midterm elections coming in a few months. So for President Trump, it is vital that he has some legacy ahead of the midterm elections and has some foreign policy achievements, because he has withdrawn from the Iran deal, the Paris climate deal, PPT, etc., numerous things. So it's high time for him to have some kind of achievement on the foreign policy front.
On the part of the DPRK,
cannot be compared to anything.
Right. On the part of the DPRK, why do they want this talk to go ahead? Even when Trump unexpectedly canceled the meeting, their response have been very measured. Ms. Park.
Well, first of all, the very fact that North Korean leader will be able to have a meeting, have a summit with a sitting U.S. president is unprecedented, and it's something that North Korea has been seeking for decades, because what it wants is an equal footing, and also to be to appear on the world stage as a normal state that is capable of engaging in dialogue, and also ultimately to be able to ensure regime guarantees from what it says is arch enemy. So although we have yet to see whether that outcome will be produced at the summit, the very fact that he will be sitting down with the U.S. president, incumbent president, in itself is a big achievement. So for them to go ahead with this is vital. And also, up until now, there have not been made any progress, even to this point, that the notion that a U.S. president would have a summit meeting was not even brought up. And up until now, there was a good atmosphere of good faith, goodwill on both sides. So it's vital for North Korea to keep the momentum.
Mr. Fan, having survived or almost managed to survive this little unexpected twist, do you think both sides will come out with some kind of a better understanding of who they are dealing with and how to better proceed?
Hopefully they can work on some details, the nuance. That's something President Trump does not care very much. But when dealing with DPRK, you should be very careful. I mean, careful about what you want to get, and what you can offer, and what kind of message you want to deliver to them. I mean, the miscommunication has been big trouble in the past, and it's very likely it will remain a big trouble for the future if they do not think about this issue in a very subtle way. and it's very likely he will ruin it. It means he really wants to solve that problem.
So what is at stake here? I mean, we all talk about denuclearization. We have had numerous discussions on this subject. Is there a common ground between the two sides that they can reach some kind of a framework agreement in terms of denuclearization that both satisfy the interests and needs of the DPRK and what President Trump wants? Mr. Fan.
It's possible. I think the DPRK has indicated that they want denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I mean, the Korean Peninsula, north and south, I guess including the nuclear umbrella enjoyed by the South Korea. And they have made a commitment that no proliferation, no more tests. And it's possible that we can achieve the denuclearization in a phased process. And by doing this, North Korea could get its external environment, changed. I mean, changing it from a better way. And North Korea had to try to, convey the message to the outside world. They want to develop economy. So that's what they want. So this can only be achieved by diplomacy. But for the United States, denuclearization has been the top priority. But only you can offer something in return, so you can get something from North Korea. So they need to work on the details and work on the roadmap and do it in a phased way. That's the only realistic approach. At this moment, I did not see that.
Ms. Park, we mentioned the word Libya model. I guess it is also time, as we go again to focus on the meeting, to look at whether or not this model is really applicable here, and whether or not the United States really mean it when they say that they want to follow the Libya model. Exactly what is the Libya model here, do we know? Because there are several time spots. We're talking about 2003 and then the U.S. intervention later. Even U.S. President Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand perfectly the whole process.
That is the very point. I think the U.S. is not very clear on what it means by the Libya model. But what can be inferred is that when they bring up the notion of Libya model, it is emphasizing first the fact that the denuclearization process took very expeditiously. Libya gave in all its nuclear weapons program to the U.S. in a very short span of time. And that's what U.S. wants from North Korea, a very accelerated denuclearization in a very short span of time. But at the same time, as you pointed out, President Trump also brought up the notion of 2011 when Libyan leader was pulled down. So the fact that, it's also implying that if the deals don't go well, and if North Korea does not completely denuclearize or give in, surrenders all its program, then it is going to face the fate of the Libyan leader. Although President Trump, after these statements from Kim Jong Un came out, said, oh, it's not the Libyan model we're following, it's a Trump model. So I think even in the U.S., President Trump's administration is not very clear what it wants exactly. But one thing is for clear, that it wants a very accelerated denuclearization process that can be concluded in a very short span of time.
What is the Trump model then, and how can the United States government convince the DPRK that the Trump model will not one day turn into the Libya model, meaning once the DPRK denuclearize, they will not find themselves one day incapable of defending themselves? Mr. Fan.
Well, the Libya model has two parts. The first part is that the WMD program of Libya was negotiated with. And the second part is that it was done very quickly. So basically, when the United States talk about Libya model, at the very beginning they mean this part. But there's also the second part is the 2011, the invasion of Libya, and Gaddafi was killed. And if Trump wants to get soft, and he's talking about he can make big deals, that is, he can offer something really big. And if the DPRK can do the denuclearization. But the problem is that the trust is nowhere, and you need to build up a trust. You need to get it done in a phased way. Only by doing that, and you can, that's usually how diplomacy works. But for the two unconvinced leader, anything could be possible.
Mr. Fan, my final question: is the DPRK sincere about denuclearization?
I believe so. I believe so. But there's a big if when we talk about the denuclearization. That is, if the hostile policy it changed. So they feel you secure. They can do the denuclearization. So the big if is something you need to work on.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Soojin Park, a public policy fellow at the Wilson Center, joining us from D.C., and Jishe, Director for Strategic Studies at the Institute of American Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And here is my point, my personal commentary. As we have witnessed this week, it is a bad idea for government officials to go on TV and talk freely at such sensitive times. When there is a huge trust deficit, unchained rhetoric can do a lot of damage. There is also a danger of putting hardliners in top positions who are too ready to voice their own opinions, whether or not it is part of a big coherent strategy, and in such a condescending matter. That, of course, will set off a harsh response on the other side. As for America's claim that the DPRK ignored in the past week to their correspondence concerning preparations for the summit, I would do the same thing. On the one hand, you say you want to meet me, meanwhile you tell me I have to totally do as you say in terms of my own country's fate. And then you also remind me of a bad precedent, in this case Libya, where someone met a bad end doing what you say, and then you accuse me of not showing up for meeting or responding to your mails. Well, when I'm angry with someone, I don't show up for planned meetings or reply to his or her emails. Isn't that just common sense? Well, let's really pray that, and we have some good signs, that the two sides are talking to each other again, and the talks can hopefully still take place at the scheduled time and place. So there could be a second shot at the summit between the two sides. But please make sure that your men don't go on TV anymore and talk off the cup from now till June 12th. By the way, that letter signed by President Trump was such a joke. It's like a kid bragging about his toys being bigger than others. When international politics sinks to such a level, you can only hope there are some adults left in the room who can help make sure that things don't go too wild. That is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.